Have you ever wondered what life was like before the sweet hum of air conditioning filled our homes? Picture this. It's a sweltering July afternoon, and you're sitting on a creaky porch swing, fanning yourself with yesterday's newspaper. The air is thick, almost syrupy, and your lemonade is sweating almost as much as you are. Welcome to summer before AC, where staying cool wasn't just a luxury, it was an art form. Let's set the scene. It's the 1930s, and the only thing hotter than the sidewalk is the debate over whether air conditioning will ever catch on. You're in a typical American home, where the windows are flung wide open, hoping to catch even the faintest whisper of a breeze. The kids are sprawled out on the living room floor, complaining it's too hot to move, while Dad's out back, tinkering with a contraption he swears will revolutionize home cooling. Spoiler alert, it won't, but points for effort, right? Now, before we dive into the ingenious and sometimes bizarre ways our grandparents and great-grandparents beat the heat, let's take a moment to appreciate just how much air conditioning has changed our lives. It's not just about comfort. It's reshaped our architecture, our social habits, and even where we choose to live. But back then, staying cool was a full-time job that required creativity, patience, and a whole lot of ice. Let's start with how people built their homes. Long before architects were worried about LEED certification, they were designing houses with one goal in mind: not turning into human puddles during the summer months. Wide porches weren't just for sipping sweet tea and gossiping, they were lifesavers. These shaded outdoor living rooms provided a refuge from the stifling indoor heat. And those high ceilings? Not just for show. Hot air rises, so the higher the ceiling, the cooler the living space. Windows were strategically placed to create cross breezes, a natural air conditioning system that worked surprisingly well when there was actually a breeze to cross. Thick walls kept the heat out during the day and released it slowly at night, creating a sort of primitive thermal regulation. And let's not forget about the sleeping porch, a screened-in balcony where families would drag their mattresses on particularly steamy nights. Nothing says sweet dreams like the constant threat of mosquito bites, right? But the real MVPs of pre-AC summers were attic fans. These massive contraptions would pull hot air up and out of the house, creating a constant flow of air that, while not exactly cool, was at least moving. The sound of these fans whirring through the night became the soundtrack of summer for many families. It was like sleeping next to a jet engine. But hey, at least you weren't sweating through your sheets. Now, let's talk about daily routines. Without air conditioning, the rhythm of life changed with the seasons. Summer meant early mornings and late evenings, with a big chunk of the day reserved for what can only be described as heat-induced lethargy. Businesses would close during the hottest hours, a practice that lives on in some countries as siesta. It wasn't laziness, it was survival. Cooking was a whole different ballgame. Turning on the oven in July? Unthinkable. Summer meals were often cold dishes, salads, and anything that didn't require adding more heat to an already sweltering kitchen. And here's a fun fact. The popularity of outdoor grilling wasn't just about flavor. It was a way to keep the cooking heat outside where it belonged. Speaking of food, let's raise a glass, preferably a frosty one, to the unsung heroes of pre-AC summers: ice and cold drinks. Ice delivery was a booming business, with icemen making daily rounds to keep iceboxes stocked. And those mason jars of iced tea? They weren't just delicious, they were lifesavers. People would carry them around like we carry water bottles today, sipping to stay hydrated and cool. But the real magic happened when the sun went down. Nighttime was when neighborhoods came alive. Families would spill out onto their front porches or stoops, seeking relief from their stuffy houses. Kids played in the streets, adults chatted with neighbors, and impromptu block parties were common. In a way, the heat forced people to be more social, creating a sense of community that some argue has been lost in our air-conditioned world. Now, let's talk about some of the more creative cooling methods. Ever heard of a sleeping shelf? It's exactly what it sounds like. A shelf built into the side of a house where people would sleep to catch whatever breeze they could. Or how about the Egyptian method? This involved sleeping on damp sheets, letting evaporation cool you through the night. Effective? Maybe. Comfortable? Debatable. Some folks got really inventive. There are stories of people rigging up homemade cooling systems involving ice blocks and fans, creating a primitive version of air conditioning. Others would hang wet sheets in doorways, hoping to cool the air as it passed through. And let's not forget the time-honored tradition of sticking your head in the freezer for a moment of icy bliss. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of life before AC was how it shaped social interactions. Without the comfort of cool indoor spaces, people were forced to be more, social. Neighbors knew each other because they saw each other every evening on their porches. Kids played outside because inside was too hot. Movie theaters, one of the first public spaces to be air-conditioned, became summer havens where people would spend entire afternoons escaping the heat. As we wrap up our journey through the sweltering past, it's worth noting that not everything about the pre-AC era was miserable. Yes, it was hot. Yes, it was uncomfortable. But there was also a certain charm to those summer evenings spent on the porch, a sense of community forged in the shared experience of enduring the heat together. Today, as we adjust our thermostats with a casual flick of the wrist, it's easy to forget how much ingenuity and resilience it took to survive summer just a few generations ago. For electricity, people would use things like fans and ice boxes to keep their homes cool in the summer. But the first real home air conditioner wasn't invented until 1902 by a man named John Gorey. He was a physician who realized that his patients suffering from yellow fever would feel much better if his office was cooler. So he developed a machine that used ice to cool and dehumidify the air. This machine was a huge success, but it was also very expensive. So Dr. Carey partnered up with a businessman named J.Q. Sherman to form the American Railway Appliance Company to mass-produce the units. In 1906, the first window unit was sold to the public, but it wasn't cheap, at $1,000. That's the equivalent of about $33,000 today. So who were the first people to buy these expensive air conditioners for their homes? Well, the exact first purchaser is not known, but we do know that the Sultan of Sulu in the Philippines bought one for his palace. He was so enamored with the technology that he had 10 more units shipped over from the US. Also in the Philippines, the Governor General of the Philippine Islands bought one for his home. And in the US, the Vanderbilt family had one installed in their mansion in Newport, Rhode Island. These early units were not without their problems, but they were known to freeze up and the hoses would often burst. But despite these issues, people still wanted them. And by the 1920s, several companies were manufacturing home air conditioners, including one in Wichita, Kansas. This company was founded by a man named Fred Wolf, who had the idea of manufacturing small appliances like toasters and fans, but he soon realized that the real money was in air conditioners. By the 1930s, his company was one of the largest manufacturers of home AC units in the country. Today's home air conditioning units are much more advanced than those early models, but they still serve the same purpose, to keep us cool and comfortable in the summer. In fact, air conditioning has become so popular that more than 80% of homes in the US now have it. From architectural innovations to social adaptations, our ancestors found ways to not just endure, but sometimes even enjoy those long, hot months. So, the next time you're basking in the cool comfort of your air-conditioned home, spare a thought for Grandma and Grandpa sweating it out on their sleeping porch. They might not have had the technology we do, but they certainly had grit and some pretty clever ways to beat the heat. As always, thank you for watching. See you on the next one. And hey, if you enjoyed this blast from the past, why not cool down your mouse finger by clicking that like button? Don't forget to subscribe. It's way easier than installing an attic fan, I promise.